Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article is speaking about France presidential elections. What are we going to discuss in this article? We will try and understand what are the important features of the French constitution. We will try and understand what are the similarities and differences between the French and the Indian constitution. First up, let's understand some of the important features of the France constitution. When we speak about the France constitution, we have Article 1 of the French Constitution, which says France shall be an indivisible, secular, democratic, and social republic. When you look at these words, we also have these similar words in the Indian preamble as well. The Indian preamble says, "We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to declare India as a sovereign, socialist, democratic, secular republic." So these words are similar to that of the Article 1 of the French Constitution. So what does Article 1 say? It says France shall be an indivisible. So we too have secular in our preamble. We too have democratic in our preamble. We also have republic in our preamble. So all these words are similar to that of the preamble of the Indian Constitution. In fact, if you look at the basic structure doctrine, secular principle is part of the basic structure. Democratic nature is part of the basic structure as well. So Article 1 of the French Constitution is almost equivalent to what is present in the Indian preamble. So Article 1 says France shall be an indivisible, secular, democratic and social republic, and it will also ensure equality to all its citizens without any distinction to race, religion, and it shall respect every other belief of the individual. That is Article 1 of the French Constitution. Then we have Article 2. What does it speak about? The maxim of the republic shall be liberty, equality, and fraternity. The principle of the republic shall be government of the people, by the people and for the people. When we speak about India's preamble, we have words like justice, we have words like equality, we have words like fraternity and liberty. Where have we imported this concept? We have imported this concept from the France. So basically, Article 2 of the France Constitution speaks about liberty, equality and fraternity, where India has imported these ethos, these values into our Indian Constitution as well. So the principle of republic shall be government of the people, by the people and for the people is also synonymous with the definition of democracy. Generally, when we ask what is democracy, we say that democracy is of the people, by the people and for the people. This is clearly articulated in Article 2 of the France Constitution. Then we have Article 3, which says national sovereignty shall vest in the people, who shall exercise it through their representatives by means of referendum. What do we understand by this? Here, the article is speaking about the elections. Anyone who has attained majority would be able to vote in the elections, which means that there is political sovereignty which is given to the people. Even in the Indian Constitution, we have the preamble which says we the people of India. So the sovereignty in terms of Article 3 in the French Constitution is with the people. The Indian Constitution in the preamble also says we the people of India. So it means that it is the people who vote the representatives. The representatives represent these people. Ultimately, the system of government established and maintained is based on the popular consent. Then we have Article 6. It says the President of the Republic shall be elected for a term of 5 years by direct universal suffrage, and whenever the president is elected, he will not hold office for more than 2 consecutive terms. And at the same time, the president also has been given the power to impose emergency as well. When can the president impose the emergency? When the institutions of France are threatened, when the independence of the country is threatened, when the integrity and sovereignty of France is threatened, when France is not able to keep up to the international commitments and its constitutional public authorities are interrupted, they are not allowed to function as per their requirements. In such a case, you have this particular power given to the French president and he would be able to impose emergency. So we have the executive, we have the legislative branch, and they also have the judicial branch as well. So the executive branch, the head of the state and the head of the executive is the president, elected by a universal suffrage. Originally, a president of the Fifth Republic was elected for a 7-year term. This was the original constitution. Since 2002, the president has been elected for a 5-year term. Since the passing of 2008 constitutional reform, the maximum number of terms a president can serve has been limited to the president, who is also the supreme commander of the military, determines policy with the aid of the Council of Ministers. This is to do with the executive branch. Then we have the legislative branch, where the French parliament is made up of two houses or chambers. The lower and the principal house of the parliament is the Assemblée nationale, our national assembly. The second chamber happens to be the Senate. Members of the parliament, called députés, are elected by universal suffrage in general elections that take place every 5 years. And when it comes to judiciary, the independent judiciary in France is based on the civil law system, which has evolved from the Napoleonic Code. It is basically divided into two branches. One is what is called as the judicial branch, the other happens to be the administrative branch. When it comes to the judicial branch, it deals with the civil and the criminal laws, and when it comes to the administrative branch, it deals with the appeals against the executive decisions. Such a differentiation, such a bifurcation, such a branching of judiciary is not present in India, but it is present in France. Now let us try and understand some of the key differences and similarities between Indian constitution and the French constitution. When we speak about one of the aspects of the constitution is whether the constitution is written or not. When it comes to India, India happens to have a written constitution where we have the articles, the bare act which is written. It is in the form of a book. That is what is called as written constitution. And India happens to be one of the lengthiest written constitution. Similarly, France also has a written constitution as well. So the similarity happens to be that both India and France constitution are written. If I have to give you an example of unwritten constitution, it happens to be United Kingdom. The second important principle is in reference to the flexibility or rigidity. If you are able to change the constitution easily, that is called as flexible constitution. If you are not able to change it easily, bring about amendments, that is called as the rigid constitution. One example of flexible constitution is the United Kingdom constitution. The rigid constitution happens to be United States of America. And when it comes to the French constitution, it is said to be a rigid constitution. The third principle is to understand whether that particular constitution has a unitary bias where more powers are given to the central government, or is it a federal one like in the United States of America, where there is division of powers between the central government and state government. If we have to consider the federal constitution, we have the United States of America. When it comes to India, the Indian constitution is federal in character. Yes, we do have the differences, we do have the division between the central government and state government, but what we have is the unitary bias. When it comes to the France constitution, it has a unitary feature. Now the type of government, when it comes to India, what we have is the parliamentary system, but when it comes to the France, they do not have a parliamentary system, but it has some features of the parliamentary system and other features of the presidential system, which is why it is also called as semi-presidential type. And finally, when we speak about the president of India, he is elected, but he is elected indirectly. But when it comes to the president of France, he is elected directly. When it comes to the president in India, he is like a rubber stamp. Most of the powers are consolidated with the cabinet and the prime minister of India. But when it comes to the president of France, he is the real power, and he has large scale powers that are given to him as well. So what are the similarities? The similarities is in terms of written constitution. Similarities is in terms of republic nature. Similarities is in terms of they also have the emergency provisions. But what are the differences? One is in terms of judiciary, and the other is in terms of the unitary model of France rather than federal model of India. These are some of the differences as well as similarities when it comes to French and the Indian constitution. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says, is Hindi or English beneficial as the link language? Before we understand what this article is all about, we have already recorded a video to help you understand, is Hindi a national language? The answer to this is Hindi is not a national language. It is the official language. Is Hindi being imposed by the central government? The central government says Hindi is being promoted so that it can act as a lingua franca for the entire country, but some of the South Indian states say that it is is being imposed on them, and they are agitating against this imposition. What is this Hindi imposition all about? What is this promotion of Hindi all about? What is the constitutional parameter? What are the constitutional angles? Should it be done or not? Has been recorded in one of our videos recently as part of the Big News initiative. But now what are we going to discuss? The article currently goes on to say that this whole idea of promotion of Hindi or a particular language should not be taken up. Instead, a promotion of a language should happen on its own, which is on the basis of utility and not on the basis of imposition, not on the basis of central government pushing this particular idea of development of one particular language. If we have to consider the statistics, residents of only 12 of the 35 states and union territories reported Hindi as their first choice of language for communication according to census 2011. Hindi is an umbrella term encompassing about 56 languages including Bhojpuri, Rajasthani, Hindi and Chhattisgarhi. While 43% of Indians speak Hindi, only 26% speak Hindi specifically as their mother tongue. So the article here goes on to say, just because there are majority of the people who understand Hindi, they are able to speak Hindi, this should not be promoted at the national level. Why? Because this will become a majoritarian cause which is trying to push it against the entire country, but instead what should be the focus is the utility, whether that particular language is useful to the people. If English is useful, it should be promoted. If any other language is useful, such language should be promoted. So this should happen on the beneficial quotient. It should be happening on the basis of utility of the language and not because majority of the people are speaking. In order to substantiate it, the author brings into picture the other set of statistics. The author says in all those states where English is being used as a language, where most of the people are able to speak English either as a second language, third language, or first language, in those states, what we have is the Human Development Index, which is comparatively better. So he says in those states or the union territories where English is being spoken, the standard of living is much better. They are able to articulate themselves better. They have much better livelihood means and mechanisms, which ultimately means there is better human development index. He compares the same with those states or the union territories where Hindi is prominent. In these states, what we actually see is that the HDI or the Human Developmental Index is comparatively less in comparison to these states. The author also brings into picture the migration as well. When we speak about migration, what happens in all those states which are non-Hindi speaking states, what we are witnessing is the maximum amount of in-migration. Many people from the Hindi heartland in from those states where Hindi is the prominent language, they are moving to the non-Hindi speaking states looking for better opportunities, and in all these non-Hindi speaking states the link language happens to be English. So what is happening? People are migrating. So there is in migration. People from the Hindi speaking language states are moving to the non-Hindi speaking states where English is acting as the link language. So what we have is the net migration which is happening to the non-Hindi states, and when it comes to the Hindi speaking states, there is out migration. People are moving from the Hindi speaking states to the other states, says the author. Now, if we have to consider, should English be promoted as one of the languages which is acting as a link language, the author goes on to say that yes, it can be promoted, but it is basically about the utility. Yes, English happens to be one of the official languages, but it is not mentioned in the 8th schedule. Remember, this can be very important from the preliminary examination point of view, that English is not present in the 8th schedule. We have Assamese, Bengali, Gujarati, Hindi, Kannada, Kashmiri, Konkani, Malayalam, Manipuri, Marathi, Nepali, Oriya, Punjabi, Sanskrit, Sindhi, Tamil, Telugu, Urdu, Bodo, Santali, Maithili and Dogri. Do you see English in this? No. English happens to be the official language along with Hindi, but it is not the 8th schedule language. Since it is not an 8th schedule language, remember, it can be asked in your preliminary examination. Now the author goes on to say, if we have to consider the statistics, yes, Hindi happens to be one of the languages which is spoken by the majority in the country. If we have to consider juxtapose Hindi with English, let's look at the statistics. In terms of mother tongue, India had just 2.6 lakh English speakers in 2011, a tiny fraction of 121 crore people counted in that census. It was the second language of 8.3 crore respondents in 2011, second only to Hindi's 13.9 crores. If third language is also considered, then English was spoken as mother tongue, second language or third language by over 10% of the population in 2011, behind only 57%. Bengali was third at about 9%. As mother tongue, Maharashtra accounted for over 1 lakh of 2.6 English speakers. As second language, English is preferred over Hindi in parts of the northeast, among the 17.6 lakh with Manipuri as their mother tongue in 2011. 4.8 declared their second language as English compared to 1.8 lakh for the Hindi. Now the question is, should English be acting as the link language for the entire country? Some say yes, some say no. Let's look at the arguments. What are the arguments that say yes, that English should be promoted as the link language? When it comes to the parents' preferences, what exactly is happening? Most of the parents want their children to be educated in English. So they put them in the English medium schools, either in the first language or as a second language. Since most of the students are aware of the English language, this should be promoted. When we speak about states like Karnataka and the states like Telangana, we have the capitals like the Bengaluru and Hyderabad. These important cities are known as the IT hubs, and Bangalore is also called as the Silicon Valley. Why was Bangalore able to establish itself as the Silicon Valley of India? That is because English was acting as a link language. Third, when we speak about English, it also gives number of opportunities. Let's say, for example, United States of America outsources all its work to India primarily because we are able to articulate and present ourselves much better in English. So this is also an option. There are much better opportunities when it comes to English language. So because it is being taught in the schools, because it helps in communication, because it helps in providing job opportunities, English should be acting as the link language. Added to this, we also know for the fact that the southern states of Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu have strong emotions with respect to their languages. These states prefer English as the means of link language over Hindi as well. So taking this into picture, we can say that English can also act as the link language. However, the author points out that it should be on the basis of utility and not on the basis of number. So utility in terms of job opportunities, utility in terms of the human development index, utility in terms of how the employment opportunities are provided, utility in terms of how it is able to provide livelihood means and mechanisms to such people. Currently in the state of Karnataka, especially in the city of Bangalore, there are people who flow from different parts of the country. There are these Kannadigas who speak to them in their languages. There are these people who come to Bangalore, they also speak Kannada as well. If there are people who go to Tamil Nadu, they interact in Tamil. If there are people from Tamil Nadu who go to some other Hindi speaking states, they start interacting in Hindi. So this imposition may not work, but instead the status quo is the need of the hour. People will learn the language on the basis of their need. People will learn the language on the basis of the utility. People will learn the language on the basis of the usefulness of the language, and such should not be imposed, but this should be left to the choice of the people, is what is this article all about. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Red Star over Solomon Islands. Before we understand what this article is, let's look at some of the important facts with respect to Solomon Islands from the preliminary examination point of view. Where is it located? It is located in Pacific Ocean. So you might have a question in the preliminary examination which might ask you, where is the Solomon Islands located? So remember, it is in Pacific Ocean and not in Indian Ocean. It is close by to Australia Australia, this can also be important from the preliminary examination point of view. So what is this article speaking about? The article currently goes on to say, when you look at Solomon Islands, which is currently in the Pacific Ocean, it was earlier very close to United States of America. It had good security relationship with Australia, and it also had good relationship with New Zealand. But of late, it is tilting towards China, says this article. A document leaked on social media revealed that Solomon Islands has proposed a deal aimed at increased security cooperation with China. This deal is regarded as an unprecedented one for China in the South Pacific region. So because it is tilting in favor of China, the island's move has raised alarms in various countries such as United States of America and Australia. What are the features of this particular security cooperation? When we speak about this security cooperation, the deal authorizes China to send its police, armed police, military personnel, and other law enforcement and armed forces to the islands upon the country's request, or if China views that the safety of its projects and its personnel in the islands are at risk. There are two viewpoints to it. Let's assume for a moment that there is an internal turmoil. Let's say there is a public order issue or there is a riot. In that particular case, this security cooperation says that the government would be able to ask China to send Chinese personnel to this island so that they are able to take care of the public order. That's the key parameter for the security cooperation. The second aspect is, even if it is not requested by the government of Solomon Islands, China would be able to send its police, armed police, military personnel if it feels that its projects and infrastructure located in Solomon Islands is being threatened. So on one side, there is government which is requesting it. On the other side, an unanimous decision is taken by China even without the order or the permission given by the government. The deal also enables China's naval vessels to use the islands for the logistic support, and there are also speculations that China may build its next overseas naval base in the Solomon Islands after Djibouti. Currently, China has its overseas naval bases in Djibouti, and after Djibouti, this can be another country where naval vessels can visit this island. They would also be able to check what is happening in and around the Pacific Ocean. These are some of the important features when it comes to what is the security deal all about. Now let's understand some of the background information as to why Solomon Islands is increasing proximity towards China. When we speak about Solomon Islands, up until 1978, it was under the control of United Kingdom. Much prior to that as well, there was Germany which had control of Solomon Islands. Japan also had control over this particular island, and finally it came back under the control of United Kingdom. So Solomon Islands became independent in 1978 as a constitutional monarchy under the British Crown with a parliamentary system of government. And after it became independent, it also had close ties with multiple countries. One such country where it also had security relationship was in reference to Australia. So in case of any internal turmoil or riots, it was Australia which was acting as a first responder in the Solomon Islands. But of late, it is tilting towards China primarily because of the huge pockets that China possesses. China has offered 500 million US dollars as financial aid. This amount of money is too huge for Solomon Islands. In fact, for the last couple of years, Taiwan is also spent as well, but it is not able to compensate to the amount of money that China is presently spending in Solomon Islands. So this, the government says, it is diversifying its resources. As of now, it has good connections with Australia, it has good connections with United States of America, it has good connections with New Zealand. So added to these countries, what it is trying to do is to diversify its sources. But why is China interested in Solomon Islands? There are multiple factors to it. One is the Taiwan factor. What is the Taiwan factor? We know for the fact that whenever China speaks about Taiwan, Taiwan is not recognized as an independent country, but China says Taiwan is part of China itself. But Taiwan does not accept that. Taiwan says Taiwan is independent and it is not reliant on China. So what is happening? If any country has to have a diplomatic relationship with China, they should not have diplomatic relationship with Taiwan. When it comes to Taiwan, it has a lot of control in the Pacific Ocean. It has diplomatic relationship with as many as 6 countries in the Pacific Ocean. So in order to cut down its influence in the Pacific Ocean, China is pumping in a lot of money. So basically, the islands in the South Pacific are countries where China has competition from Taiwan for diplomatic recognition. So in order to cut down the Taiwan influence in this part of the Pacific Ocean, China is pumping in a lot of money. Then we have to consider the geopolitical interests. What are these geopolitical interests? Let's say, for example, there is voting that is happening in the United Nations. What you have to garner is the support of multiple countries. If these countries support, that is when a particular resolution has to be passed. If countries are in favor of Taiwan, countries are in favor of United States of America, it means that China will not have control in United Nations. So what it is trying to do is to get these small countries towards itself so that it is able to garner their support in the United Nations. That is what is to do with geopolitical interest. The third is in terms of the maritime interest. What do we mean by maritime interest? These countries also have a lot of resources. They also have a lot of fishing activities as well. So when it comes to the Solomon Islands, they have large maritime exclusive economic zone. They also have fishing activity. They also have a lot of timber as well. They also have a lot of minerals as well, which is why China is enticed towards Solomon Islands. And finally, the strategic interest will also have to be taken into picture, where Solomon Islands is located in Pacific Ocean. If China has good relationship with Solomon Islands, it can also build military bases, and at the same time it would also be able to control strategically some of the key areas in the Pacific Ocean. As a result, what we are witnessing is a conflict which is brewing in Solomon Islands in terms of geopolitics, which may have geopolitical ramifications. So what are the countries doing? We have Australia, which has now increased its financial support to the island country and has also extended its security mission till 2023 as the country hosts the Pacific Games. Then we have the United States of America, which is now planning to reopen its embassy in the Solomon Islands after 29 years. And New Zealand has also criticized China for attempting to militarize this region and causing unwanted tensions in the Pacific Ocean region. So because China has been increasing the money, China has been funding projects in Solomon Islands, these countries have also become active as they want to make sure that this particular region of Pacific Ocean does not become the bed of conflicts. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says a window for interstate collaboration to breathe easy. This article here is speaking about pollution in the national capital region. It is also speaking about pollution in general in the North Indian states. When we speak about pollution, one of the key areas that we have to discuss is the stubble burning. And when we speak about stubble burning, one of the states that comes into picture happens to be Punjab. What exactly happens? There are a large number of farmers who engage in stubble burning. As a result of stubble burning, the air pollution is also being caused in Delhi. But right now, we have a government in Delhi which is represented by the Aam Aadmi Party. Then we also have the Punjab government, which is once again represented by the Aam Aadmi Party. So all the conflicts that were earlier present because of different political parties can now be removed, and what we require is coordination to control the pollution is what is this article all about. So in order to control the pollution, the author provides some of the recommendations. What are these recommendations? The first important recommendation is the engagement. What is it about the engagement? As I just discussed, there were different political parties, one in Delhi, the other in Punjab. So there was a lot of conflict that was happening. They were not able to reach a consensus. So now, since the same political parties are represented in Delhi as well as in Punjab, they require coordination. So ideally, there was conflict in the earlier scenario, but in the present scenario, this has to be rooted out and they have to find out what are the sources of pollution. Apart from the stubble burning, if there are any other sources, they have to find out, they have to engage, they have to talk, they have to coordinate, they have to collaborate and bring up and come up with a consensus is the first argument put out by the author. The second is in terms of sharing the information. What do we mean by it? Let's say, for example, there are a number of states in India which are facing the issues of stubble burning. We have Punjab, we have Haryana, we also have Uttar Pradesh, so on and so forth. All these states might have their own unique characteristics in trying to find out what is the solution for that particular problem. So the author says that this information sharing should not be restricted to that particular state, but all the states will have to come together, share information so that we can ultimately cut down on the pollution front. Third is in terms of collaboration in the execution. What do we mean by collaboration in the execution? As of now, there is knowledge sharing. After the knowledge sharing is done, if there is a pilot project which is executed successfully in some part of the state or in another state, the same should be exported to another state so that thereby ultimately there is mitigation of the pollution. One such example that we can speak of is the Pusa biodecomposer, or if there is any other innovative measure, or there is any other chemical, or there is any other instrument which is able to curb the pollution. In all these cases, if there is a proven solution which is acting as a pilot project in some other state or in some other region, that should be exported to every other state and the region. The fourth important recommendation is market for the diversified crops. What do we mean by it? When we look at farmers from Punjab or from Uttar Pradesh or from Haryana, they prefer growing wheat as well as paddy. Why? That is because they already have an established market. But the author in this particular case goes on to say that other crops should also be present. There have to be diversified set of crops, and these crops, if grown by the farmers, such crops should also have the market. So there has to be a policy initiative taken by the government so that in case wheat and paddy is replaced by some other crop, such crops should also be provided with the market. That is when farmers will choose such crops, is what is the fourth recommendation. Finally, extending interstate cooperation. What do we mean by it? Apart from all the knowledge sharing, sharing of the solutions to one other state, what you require is active participation, interstate cooperation, sorting out different types of issues for which Northern Zonal Council can be made use of, says the author. So the author goes on to say that as of now, there is not much coordination, but going forward, since we have the same political party forming the government in Delhi as well as in Punjab, issues will have to be fixed and all the recurring issues will have to be sorted so that we can breathe easy, which means pollution has to be controlled, is what is this article all about. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Highlight the significant features of the French Constitution and discuss the similarities and differences with the Indian Constitution. Next question, should English be promoted as the link language in India? Critically examine. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review. Do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.